Great. All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the October Tech Policy Recess event. Before we get started, I wanted to note that this event is hosted by the Congressional Internet Caucus Academy, and it's hosted in conjunction with the Congressional Internet Caucus and its co-chairs. On the House side, the caucus co-chairs are Congresswoman Anna Eshoo of California and Congressman McCaul of Texas. And on the Senate side, it's Senators Patrick Leahy of Vermont and John Thune of South Dakota. As you may know, October is, and by the way, I'm Zach Isakowitz. I'm Congressman McCaul's coalitions director. And I'm very excited to be here today and to hear from these panelists. As you may know, October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month. So this event will focus on one of the more pressing issues in the cybersecurity and national security space, and that is ransomware. Ransomware is a rapidly growing threat and is being increasingly utilized by bad actors across the globe. And, it won't take you long to do a little research and see the threat that it poses and the risk that it poses to government and businesses and citizens in the United States and abroad. So I'm certainly excited to hear from all of our panelists today to get their thoughts and perspectives on the issue. Just a few more housekeeping things. There will be a tech policy recess event during about every congressional recess. So stay tuned for November's session, which you should hear about soon. There will be a panel of experts today, again, reflecting on the changing nature of the ransomware business models. And finally, we'll have a segment we're calling Career Day, where we ask people who have interesting jobs in tech policy to describe what they do. And today we'll be hearing from a ransomware negotiator, which is awesome. Our moderator today is Ari Schwartz. He's a managing director of cybersecurity services and policy at Venable. Before Venable, Ari served on the National Security Council at the White House as a special assistant to the president and senior director for cybersecurity. He was also at the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and before that with the Center for Democracy and Technology. And with that, Ari, I'll hand it off to you.
Thank you so much, Zach. And Mr. McCaul, Representative McCaul, has been really a true leader on cybersecurity since he got to Congress. We really appreciate his continued leadership on these issues and your work with him. Thank you. So I'm going to introduce the panelists. We have quite a lot to talk about in this space. The first is Vishal Hariprasad, and Vishal goes by the unconventional nickname of V8, as you see there. He is the co-founder and CEO of Resilience, which is a cyber insurance company. He's a graduate of the Air Force Academy and served on active duty with the NSA. He currently is in the reserves as a cyber warfare officer assigned to the 90th Cyber Operations Squadron. V8 has built cybersecurity products and companies and is helping usher in the modern approach to cyber insurance. And he joins us from his office in San Francisco. Next, we have Matthew McCabe. Next slide here. The next speaker is Matthew McCabe, and he goes by the less conventional nickname Matt, and is the general counsel and risk officer for Kivu Consulting, Inc., a cybersecurity and services firm. Prior to joining Kivu, Matt was senior vice president and assistant general counsel for cyber policy at Marsh. He formerly served as policy director on the Homeland Security Council for the White House and senior counsel at the U.S. Homeland Security Committee. I've worked with Matt for a number of years. He's worked on cybersecurity for almost 20 years at this point, so really well established in the area. And then the third panelist and our first speaker is going to be Jennifer Coughlin, who goes by the less conventional nickname Jen, but spells it with two N. More conventional nickname Jen, spells it less conventionally with two N's. She's the founding partner of Mullen's Coughlin. She focuses her practice solely on providing organizations of all sizes from every industry sector in first-party breach response and third-party privacy defense legal services. Ms. Coughlin has counseled hundreds of clients in investigating, responding to events, and compromising information and system security, working closely with client resources, third-party forensic consulting experts, and law enforcement to identify the nature and scope of a compromise. So I'm going to turn it over to Jen. She's going to give us kind of the intro into the world of ransomware. We're going to start there and build into how the problem is evolving. Jen.
Great, thanks, Ari. Hi, everybody. Thank you for being with us today. Ransomware is a very, very big and booming business. And just to give you some context with numbers from my firm. So we started our firm on October 1st of 2016. We just turned 5 years old. We started with 13 attorneys, and we started with the idea that we were going to focus on nothing but providing counsel to the organizations in the context of data privacy. Before they experienced an incident, during the investigation in response to data privacy incidents, and after incidents in regulatory investigations and litigation. So again, October 1st, 2016, 5 years ago, we started with 13 attorneys. We just celebrated our 5-year anniversary, and we have 94 attorneys. Why? Because ransomware is booming. In 2019, we had 2,350 different data privacy incidents come into our firm, 681 of which were ransomware matters. In 2020, we had 3,558 matters come into our office, 1,024 of which were ransomware matters. And in 2021, as of September 29th, so I'm a few weeks out of date, but we had 3,094 matters come into the firm, 854 of which were ransomware. So what has happened over the past few years? The criminals have realized that they can weaponize information systems to exploit vulnerabilities, cripple US organizations, attack US organizations, and exploit money. So I'm going to talk today about who the key stakeholders are in the incident response process, which will include the forensic investigation and ransom negotiation firm, and Matt's going to spend more time talking about that. And it's also going to include the cyber insurer, and V8 is going to spend some time talking about that. And then I'm going to give you a general overview of what the ransomware incident response roadmap looks like. So, who are the key stakeholders in the incident response process? You are going to have the victim organization, the organization that is experiencing the data privacy incident. You're going to have the cyber insurer, and again, V8 will talk more about that. You will have the cyber insurance broker, and Matt might be able to talk a little bit about that from his time over at Marsh. You are also going to have other insurance carriers. So you have cyber insurance, which is a standalone product designed to help organizations in responding to data privacy incidents, but there might be some coverage under other policies like kidnap and ransom or property that the organization's broker may want to tender a claim to if the organization experiences a data privacy incident. You're going to have the privacy coach. That's me. We're also called the breach coach. We are considered the quarterback of the incident response process. You are going to have law enforcement. We report to law enforcement all the time, especially in the context of ransomware matters. The forensic investigation firm that is going to assist in the investigations, the incident, understanding what happened, how it happened, is it ongoing, how do we restore operations or access to data, and what information may be at risk as a result of the incident. You're going to have the ransom negotiation and payment firm. Some firms like Kivu, they do this in-house. Other forensic investigation firms utilize a subcontractor to provide these services. You are going to have restoration firms that will assist in getting the organization operational again. And sometimes, again, just like ransom negotiation and payment, some forensic firms have these capabilities in-house, while other times they are subcontractors of the forensic investigation firm. You have the data mining firm that is going to undertake an analysis, programmatic and manual, of data that may be at risk as a result of the incident to identify sensitive information contained therein. Public relations firm to assist with any internal and external messaging regarding the incident. Notification firm, that's going to be the firm that provides the individual notifications, typically via mail, sometimes via email as well. And they would be doing the mailing and also providing call center services in case any of the individuals have any questions about the incident and the impact to them. Credit and identity monitoring firm. This is something that is required by some but not all laws, and there are organizations that make the business decision to offer it even where they are not required to do so under law. And then regulatory agencies. So we are notifying regulatory bodies of these incidents every single day. So before I turn into a discussion about the general roadmap in the ransomware incident response process, some of you may be wondering, why on earth are lawyers involved in this process? Isn't it just a tech issue? And isn't it just the organization needing to become operational again? Lawyers provide a very critical service in the incident response process. And what we do is, like I said earlier, we quarterback the entire process. We are going to be engaging other support providers to assist in the investigation and response to the incident. We do it under privilege. We want to protect the information they come into possession of, their conclusions, their findings, to the best extent possible in attorney-client privilege, because as you may imagine, sometimes at the end of these matters, if there is pen put to paper, it would be a report card of D's and F's, and we don't want that getting out to people that we don't want to know about that information. Our role is to direct the incident response process. We are going to direct the services provided by all of the other providers so that we can ensure the organization is providing is engaging in an efficient, timely, and compliant incident response process. And so that we're getting the information that we need to provide legal counsel to the organization so that they understand what do they have to do in response to the data privacy incident. Who do they have to notify? When do they have to notify? What do they need to tell them? How do they need to tell them? And also what type of documentation they need to have in their records regarding the incident and their investigation and response. So the general roadmap in ransomware incident response process, you're going to have incident detection. That's going to be the moment in time when the victim organization realizes there's a problem. And sometimes that moment in time is when law enforcement shows up on their doorsteps or picks up the phone and calls them and says, hey, you've got a problem. Other times it's when employees try to turn on their computers and access their email and their systems and they can't do it. So what happens next? You're going to see a parallel track happen here. You're going to see the organization reach out to the cyber insurer or their cyber broker. They're also going to be reaching out to us because, again, we spearhead the whole incident response process. The notification to the carrier can sometimes be done directly via the victim organization, or sometimes they work through their broker. Like I said earlier, to notify the cyber insurer and any other policies the broker may say they should tender a claim under. So we have the engagement of the breach coach by the victim organization. And this is something important to note. We are engaged directly by the victim organization. We are not engaged by the insurance company to provide services to their insured. It is an engagement between us and the victim organization. What we do next, we notify law enforcement. And we did this before the October 2020 advisory came down. We've always recognized the importance of reporting to law enforcement. Ryan Lisinski is a very good friend of mine. We want to make sure law enforcement knows about the incident. We don't know much at this point in time, but we want to put it on their radar that we've got something going on, we're looking into it, we're handling it. Sometimes we receive inquiries from law enforcement, other times we don't, but we do always provide notice to law enforcement once we're engaged. We are also going to be engaging the forensic investigation firm to answer all the questions I said earlier about what we're trying to understand about the incident. And that's the information that we need so that we can provide legal counsel to the organization. Now, in the context of ransomware, and I'll let Matt talk about this a little bit more, you may be reaching out to the threat actor with no intention of making payment of the ransom whatsoever, but there is some strategy behind stopping the clock and letting them know we're here, stop harassing our employees, stop harassing our customers, tell us what you know, tell us how you got it. So we are going to be working with the forensic investigation firm or their subcontractor that's doing the ransom negotiation payment and the client to work through the type of messaging engagement that we're going to have with the threat actor, while we are also determining, do we have any need for the encryption key? Do we need to actually entertain payment to the threat actor? We are going to be working with the client to understand, can they restore from backups? Are there other alternative sources of data that they can turn to instead of paying for the decryption key? But that doesn't mean that we aren't reaching out to the threat actor in the beginning. Sometimes from a strategy perspective, that's the right thing to do, to buy some time so that we can figure out what exactly we're dealing with. We are going to be working with the organization to restore operations to their systems, either via the decryption key or via other alternative sources of data. And we would be working with Kivu or the other firm to do that. We are going to be also trying to put a box around not only how it happened, how did they get in, what are the holes we need to plug them, but what data might be at risk, because there are laws and there are contracts and there are guidances out there that say to organizations, if you have an event and it impacts the security of certain types of data, you need to tell people about it. You need to tell individuals, you need to tell regulators, you need to tell consumer reporting agencies, you need to tell other parties. So we need all the information that we're getting from the forensic investigation to determine under the law and under contract and under the regulatory framework applicable to the organization, what type of disclosure and documentation obligations we have. And on the point of whether or not we need to pay the ransom, of the matters that we had in 2020 and 2021, we had, of the 1,024 in 2020, 255 organizations made the payment. So what does that mean? We always start from the point of payment being the option of last resort. Nobody wants to pay a threat actor. Nobody is receiving the ransom demand and saying, $10 million your price, $10 million, that's what I'm paying. We're working with the client and also with Kivu to understand, do they have viable backups? What will the restoration from backups entail? Do we have alternative sources of data? Can we recreate the data? Can we forego access to the data and restore operations and keep business going? But we're always going to be considering the business interruption impact of the event to the organization. So in 2020, we saw about 25% of our clients saying, you know what, we explored all those options, we explored all those avenues, we have no choice, we gotta pay. And if you look at the stats for the reason behind payment, 60% of the time they're paying because they need the key. 2021, 854 matters. As of September 29th, payment was made on only 141 of them. So that's a good stat, it's about 16%. Our clients, nobody likes paying the ransoms. I won't speak for V8, I won't speak for Matt, but nobody likes paying the ransoms. It's the option of last resort. It is sometimes the only option for some organizations, but we are seeing organizations being better prepared to respond to ransomware events and not need to pay the ransom because they do have the ability to restore access to data. So that in a nutshell is the role of the Privacy Council, the stakeholders in the incident response process, and the general roadmap for the incident response, with some fun stats weaved in that I hope are very helpful and educational to everybody. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Ari. Ari, you're on mute.
So, yeah, thanks. I really like those stats. They were very useful. So I think they really informative. So let me move on to Matt, and we can talk a little bit about, we're going to come back later and talk about his journey from congressional staffer to ransom negotiator, which I'm sure some of the congressional staffers in the crowd would be interested in hearing how that happened. But we'll start just by hearing about Kivu's role. Jen laid it out a little bit, but I think going in a little more detail, and like the changes we've seen in the threat actors as well.
Yeah, thanks very much. And for anybody else who didn't hear it on the intro, I was formerly on the Committee on Homeland Security. I was underneath Chairman King, but also Chairman McCaul at the time. So I really appreciate this full circle and being able to come back and discuss this issue with you. So as Jen had gone over, I came from the world of insurance, and I formerly was a broker. And the role of an insurance broker at the time is, hey, my client just called me. They're tremendously upset. I need to call somebody like Jen who's going to figure this out. That's really the role the broker plays. And that's when Jen's firm takes over. And as she said, she's the quarterback. I am currently general counsel and chief risk officer for a company that's one of the vendors that can provide different services. And I would break those services down to 3 different types. One is the forensics, which Jen went over, the payments, ransomware payments, which I can discuss in further detail, and restoration of systems. And the first thing I would want to touch on is to build out on earlier comments is the challenges of forensics that can occur during these events. So the event happens, especially with ransomware. It's less so when the extortion is about the theft of data. But when there's the ransomware event, it's instantly obvious that we have a very difficult event on our hands because the company is suddenly in crisis. Forensics might not get on the ground for 24 hours, and even a week, 10 days, 2 weeks later, might still not know what that vulnerability is because their systems are devastated and they're really working on restoration of systems at this point. So they really have 3 primary concerns at this time. How are our customers impacted? How long is it going to be until we're back up? And how are we working with our regulators? And I say specifically regulators because I find from the law enforcement side, it's a little more collaborative and there's a little more information sharing, where regulators are really looking down the road of there's going to be an audit, there's going to be a discussion of what happened at the time. Jen went through the nightmare of the D's and F's report card. That's certainly something that you're going to have to be very apparent and honest about with your regulator, but you're going to have to prepare for that message if it is the case. So all this is going on at the same time. And as you know, we went through, or Jen went through, the number of different entities involved with working on this response from within the affected victim and also the vendors. It takes a lot of coordination time. As that's walking through, we are probably within the first 24 hours getting pinged by the ransomware actor. That actor might be working through a Tor portal, might be working through an encrypted form of chat messaging. Telegram or QTalks have been recent ones that have been used, and are simply kind of setting forth a demand of, this is what we expect as a pricing. There is a wide range of professionalism amongst these actors. You might have some come in that are instantly recognizable threat actors. Conti is a very big one, especially right now. And you know right away what you can expect from them on performance. You can know what you can expect from their decryption tool. And you can also probably predict where they will go as far as a negotiation and lowering their demand. That's because they have a lot of events, and that's because they're well established. You have other threat actors which are recognized, but less so professional. So it might even become a little antagonistic as you're communicating with them. You might have to step away for a couple of days just to have a cooling off period. One note on this particular brand of threat actor, they increasingly don't like negotiators. They don't want us involved, and therefore we'll probably be acting as the company at the time, and we'll be doing everything we can to not be discovered, because they know that everything that we can do is buying time and bringing down their price. So we're in a bit of a precarious position, and that's why it takes, a certain degree of experience and professionalism just to be able to communicate with these somewhat hot-triggered individuals. The last point I would bring up, though, or the last category, is kind of a new one that we've seen, which internally we've been discussing as a crazy Ivan. And what that basically means is they've gone rogue from whatever criminal organization that they're in. They're kind of just taking ransomware events independently. We think that it's a very dangerous place for them to be as far as their own criminal organization, that the penalties might be quite devastating if their organization finds out, but they're pretty much going out on their own, and they are highly unpredictable events. So as we're negotiating this, as Jen said, we're really trying to buy time. We don't advocate payment. The first words out of our mouth, even when we're brought in solely as a ransomware negotiator, is that payment should be the last option, but let's determine what your ability to backup is, how fresh your backup data is. Has it been months? Has it been a year? And what is going to be the impact to your company? Are you able to get payroll out this week? Is your engineering data affected? Overall, let's just assess your impact to know if we're going to need that data back. Once the decision's made at the time that we are going to have to pay this actor, it comes down to a very, very specific conversation between forensics of identifying this group to the best of our ability and then reviewing them on sanctions check. Now, as you can imagine, threat actors are going through great degrees of effort to obfuscate themselves, especially when they've been named by Treasury sanctions. So at this point, I would kind of just bring up my first comment on the necessity of industry and government working on this role. I will say just this morning, we had a threat actor, and we were able to speak through the breach coach with the FBI, who confirmed for us that they have no belief that this particular ransomware organization was connected to a nation state or a sanctioned entity. And that for us is, it's just a piece of negative information in that we don't have any intel at this time to connect them. But that's a great confirmation for us, because we're not seeing anything either. And it's really helpful to have law enforcement validate that for us. I would say from the position of congressional staffers, you could think about making it an advisory council or a CRS initiative about how you can better coordinate that information coming from the government and coming from the role of the ransomware coordinations who are doing the sanctions check. Because the last thing that we don't want to pay these threat actors, but if we're going to, we certainly don't want to make any kind of mistake on sanctions information. And look, it does happen that on first appearance, you might not make the connection, but later on you will. And that did happen very prominently with Evil Corp as they migrated to BitPaymer, as they migrated to Doppelpaymer. So we exert every effort to be careful on these events, but the addition of government inputs is always very helpful. I would also just talk about it from a notification perspective. The timing issue, I mean, between forensics, between the negotiation, and between what you're able to do once a ransomware event is realized. I do see reports about the notification requirements that are coming up, and my concern is that there's always kind of this thought of one-upsmanship that, well, your bill says that we should do it within 72 hours, but we would really press for something tougher. I want 24 hours. Know that within 24 hours of a ransomware event, there's extremely limited information other than we are down and we are starting to find out who's attacked us. Within 24 hours of payment, we'll have better information, but it still won't be complete from a forensic standpoint. And from very significant events of large companies with widespread outages, I'm sure Jennifer can confirm, sometimes those audits go on for months. So, know that is a long trail of recovery and discovery. And when you're putting together those requirements, you should keep that in mind as far as the utility of the information you're going to get back. I do want to say one quick word about insurance, because certainly from my time at Marsh, we had a lot of communication about the role of insurance and whether insurance is encouraging ransomware payments. There are three things that cause ransomware. There's vulnerabilities in the companies, there's the ability to extract money through cryptocurrency, and there's the ability for these organizations to shelter themselves in safe harbors overseas. And that's about it. For the insurance world is rarely involved in whether it is the best thing for the victim to pay or not. That's usually a discussion between forensics and between the breach counsel, and it's the company's decision. The insurer is there to make sure that they have a good appreciation of sanctions and that they are servicing their client correctly. But I would push back fervently on any thought that insurance is encouraging ransomware. And if we want to discuss it further, I think it's actually pushing it in the other direction. And then so later reporting of events, we turn around reports to the Department of Treasury. We have regular updates with the FBI. So we believe in collaboration with government and industry is going to be kind of the basis of improving this situation. With that, I would turn it over to VA.
Matt, just to clarify that point on insurance, that you've worked in basically in the insurance industry since as this whole thing started going on. Are you saying that now that there has been pushback and we know how to deal with these, that insurance is changed, or you think it's always been the case that insurance has pushed back and that insurance is kind of helping to stop ransomware, has always been helping to stop ransomware?
If you carry cyber insurance, that cyber insurance is going to pay for your business interruption and is going to pay for the restoration of your systems as much as it's going to pay for the extortion event itself. So if you make the decision, I'm not going to pay, you have the luxury to fall back on insurance to soften that impact. If you don't have cyber insurance, that impact is all on you, and you're probably more likely to pay because you're trying to get this event over with right away. So if anything, cyber insurance gives you options, especially when you're considering the actor who you're dealing with. So I've always found it to be counterintuitive just to suggest that insurance is encouraging the ransomware.
Great. Well, that feeds in very nicely. I don't know, Jen, if you really want to step in.
Just real quick, 30 seconds. I
Sure,
know
sure.
I know you put me on a short
Yeah.
leash earlier.
I was trying to get a good segue over to VA, and I had it all going on. But go ahead, Jen.
Weaved right in there. I wholeheartedly agree with Matt. The existence of cyber insurance is not in any way, shape, or form contributing to the proliferation of ransomware. Instead, and the stats that I gave you shows that the majority of organizations are not paying the ransom. What cyber insurance is doing for organizations is providing a critical safety net to organizations that, if otherwise left to their own devices, would have absolutely no idea what to do, probably do things wrong. And like Matt said, probably say $10 million is your opening offer, $10 million is what I pay you. So I think the opposite is happening as a result of the existence of cyber insurance. And I know V8 is going to talk about the hardening of the market, but all the underwriting requirements that organizations need to implement are now causing organizations to be more secure than they ever were before. So I think it's been a great safety net for organizations to really help them get through navigating these incidents that they really weren't prepared to navigate in the first place, but because of insurance, they were able to get through pretty well.
Okay, VA, here's your setup. The CEO of a
Teed you up.
only like specifically cyber insurance companies. Take it away.
No, this is excellent. Batting cleanup for an esteemed lineup like Jen and Matt. You literally just made all the key points I would make as a cyber insurer. So what I'll do is one, echo a couple of things here. The role of insurance, and for all the staffers here that might not be familiar with cyber insurance, insurance traditionally helps entities, individuals and companies handle emergencies and recover rapidly. It's not specific to just ransomware, though I will talk about that in a minute. You have a lot of great resources like Kivu, like Coughlin, that these companies can reach out to them, to these experts, the legal maneuvering and quarterbacking when these emergencies happen, but there is a fee for those services as well. And I know a lot of folks focus on cyber insurance and paying the ransom, but there is a fee for the forensics, for the recovery, for the backup, for the legal consulting. All the items that go into the cleanup, there is a cost associated with it. Now, traditionally, cyber insurance has been primarily focused on data and privacy breach, but over the past year, it's had to deal with ransomware head on. And an interesting point that I'll share with you, and this is from the FBI Internet Crime Complaint Center, the number of ransomware events that happened in 2015 is about the same as their reports, at least, are the exact same as 2020 from the publicly available data. And as a cyber warfare operator and as a threat intel analyst at Palo Alto Networks, I can tell you 2015 was actually the first major global ransomware event or spread. That being said, though, the difference between then and now is the cost, the amount of loss or financial impact to entities. And this speaks to and Jen said it perfectly, the weaponization and the professionalization that attackers have come up with over the past 2-3 years, and understanding how they can get to the pockets faster. The key area I'd like to share here, it's more about ransomware is more of a symptom, not a cause. 2-3 years ago, let's rewind a little bit, Home Depot, Neiman Marcus, these are all point of sale malware attacks, payment card skimmers that also were front page of the news for a good year there, where retail was getting hit. Almost every major retailer we knew was on the front page every month. Again, coming back to cyber insurance, these are all payments that had to be made at that point. And the retail industry taking the cues from the insurance and what it takes to get insured, network segmentation, proper patching, clear log monitoring. These are things that insurance now requires of retailers. And we're seeing a similar type movement in ransomware. The hardening market, what that means is over the past year, as these losses have increased, insurers are finding ways to limit their exposure smartly, but still help clients through the financial burdens that they may encounter. You now cannot get, in the vast majority of markets, it's hard for you to get a cyber insurance policy if you do not have multi-factor authentication enabled, and if you don't have proper forensic backups or backups with forensic verification on a recurring basis. Now, again, this is all in to say that insurance can start to help your constituents in 3 ways. Number one, helping them identify with clarity and actionability the steps they need to do to prepare for an attack and prevent an attack. should that attack happen, the insurer should know all the right people to talk to. That includes Coughlin, Kivu, and other cyber vendors or forensics that need to come in to play to recover and get this company back up and running. And then lastly, sharing the financial burden across all of those vendors with that company. As both Matt and Jen have said, it's a company's decision on whether they pay the ransom or not. Insurance is there to help ensure that they have limited that exposure and that they have the financial resources to make the right decisions at the right time. As we think about the future, ransomware is the topic du jour for last year, this year. Point of sale was the thing 2 years prior. Data breach the years prior to that. Ransomware is not going to be this thing going forward in the next 2-3 years, potentially, who knows? But what I can tell you is vulnerabilities, not patching, not doing proper authentication are the key elements that all attackers will leverage until they are fixed. Insurance, and you'll see moving forward, and what I would encourage from any policy moving forward is a focus on good cyber hygiene and proactive defense. And so with that, take the
Can you
questions.
just on the cyber hygiene point, because Shane Touche from American Enterprise Institute asked a question about what exactly should be put in place. You talked about multi-factor authentication and backups as things that that insurance companies are requiring, but resilience actually takes the extra step of providing services and helping to put the cyber hygiene pieces in place, help companies do that. Where do you focus for stopping ransomware in particular?
Yeah, great question, Ari, and Shane, awesome questions as well. From an insurance perspective, what I'll say is before we underwrite a risk, one of the things we do is ensure, does this entity understand the data that they're trying to protect and the cyber or the operations that they're trying to protect from a cyber incident? First and foremost, IT asset management, data management, and understanding where your points are, the items that you care about, are most important. So, where to answer your question at the beginning there, your digital assets, it's understanding what are the endpoints that you have and what are the data repositories upon which they sit. Separately, who has access to that data, and do you have multi-factor authentication in front of it? So I would start there, and I think that extends on an enterprise level, the exact same thing. What are the key data points that you care about, the proprietary information or protected classes of data? Do you know what they are in your enterprise? Do you know where they sit in your enterprise? And do you have appropriate monitoring and access management in front of it?
I think that's helpful, V8. Thanks. Does anyone else on the panel want to answer that part of the question? I wanted to go to the question that was in the chat next, which was, let me read it specifically because it's very precisely worded. Please share what percentage of ransomware attacks are due to bugs or holes or other undocumented features of the Microsoft operating system. Is it 100% as some claim?
No.
And no, right?
Yeah.
I think any of us can answer that. It is not 100%. One thing that I think that this question could lead to a little bit, and I think Matt and Jen could probably answer this, is in going a little bit more in depth into the way ransomware works, right? Can you talk about who places the ransomware onto in the current system of some of the way that ransomware works? Who places the ransomware? How do affiliates work, right? Versus the people that write the ransomware and do the negotiation and that model. I don't know. Either one of you could probably talk about that. Whoever wants to take it on, because I think that helps to explain that the exploit is separate from the writing of the ransomware and what we've been talking about today.
Matt, I can jump in real quick, Ari, and sure. I think I'll kick it to Matt.
Go ahead.
There's a concept called access brokers that is new in the past 2 years, and it's the separation. Think of it like almost like Amazon Web Services for attackers. There's the operators that focus on ransomware, on the negotiations, the customer service, the money, the financial aspects of it, which is very different than the initial access onto a corporate enterprise. And there's a whole coterie or a whole cottage industry that has stood up around selling access to, you can go on the dark web and buy VPN access to a major company in Pennsylvania. And there's a group just like across the dark web, different groups that are focusing on finding these exploitable holes in companies, whether that's social engineering or exposed data stores or exposed devices, proving that they can gain access repeatably, and then they just sell that access to whoever wants it. That could be a ransomware operator and group, and that's the one that is the topic of this conversation. It could also be just general corporate espionage, somebody who just wants to take that access, move around the networks, and sit and watch. So what we're seeing is a diversification of the supply chain of malware attacks or cyber attacks, period, which is pretty smart. Now, the ransomware operators will take that VPN access, they'll get in there, they'll do their credential monitoring or find the right credentials, move laterally across the network and start the encryption operations once they found the data they need. But that's a separate operator, and they've paid, they'll bake that into the cost of the ransom. If it costs them $25,000 for that to pay for that access, they'll ensure that their ransom is at least 50K or 100K or whatever, but they'll make sure they get their margins back. So hopefully that tees it up nicely for you, Matt.
Yeah, I mean, I look at the question and I'm not sure about the relevance of Microsoft OS as it's being brought up. So obviously Microsoft is very prominent in a lot of systems. It's a major provider, but no, not all ransomwares are traceable to Microsoft. However, I would also, you have to put it in the context of, are these Microsoft Exchange servers that are sitting at the company? And if so, are they being patched? Are they on the asset registry and being patched regularly? Are they applying what Microsoft finds? Every software company has bugs associated with them. Within the last week, I will tell you that there was a Microsoft based client who had a ransomware event, and their surviving systems were cloud-based systems also handled by Microsoft. So, I think that the real interest here is, and I saw this question come in from Shane Tews, and I'm glad to see her on the webinar. But what are we doing for baked-in security? Are we reviewing security code as much as we should before it's put in? Well, I'm starting to get a quibble. Maybe 100% is a little high. Here's the question you should ask: for patches that are being made available, what is the success rate of deploying those patches? What is our cyber hygiene at the companies? And how much security are we requiring in code? And if we require that security in code, what's the overall impact on the US economy? And should we be actually segmenting different industries on who needs higher security and who doesn't? Some stuff can be exposed because it's purely for entertainment value. When we're talking about the electric grid, I should say, or we're talking about the financial sector, it's of higher priority. I think that's the way that folks who are working in national security should be thinking. It's a very, very easy equation. Risk equals vulnerabilities times threats times consequences. And when we know the consequences, we know where to focus our efforts.
I mean, phishing is still a big vector to get in as well. It's not the only means to get in either, but it's not necessarily it's rarely a 0 day. It's rarely a new vulnerability that the actor has come up with, right? They're finding an old vulnerability, they're using phishing, attack, and then finding other means to get across, right? The question is, what controls does the enterprise have in place to stop all those different things? The old problems never go away. We continue to add on new problems to them, but at least the old problems we have solutions to that we have to be able to make sure that we're putting protections in place for. Tim just added a question, which I think is probably one worth raising here, which is the role of cryptocurrency. And Jen, I don't know if you want to take that, or Matt or VA want to take it, but I think that's a good one to ask at this point, one that Congress has been paying a lot of attention to right now. Is cryptocurrency at fault? And how does are all payments in cryptocurrency, et cetera?
Matt, do you want to go first?
Yeah, all payments are definitely in crypto. It's impossible to ignore. Certainly, I think it's wrong to pick on the crypto industry, although personally I've done it myself, but I don't think there's an appetite to get rid of crypto. So the question is, it was one of my 3 factors. Crypto enables this. And if you don't believe me, you can turn to the Ransomware Task Force report that has a great section on crypto and how ransomware actors are able to extract funds through crypto laundering. It's certainly part of the equation. And I think that Congress would be remiss if they didn't look at that part of the equation. Look at the Treasury's recent sanctioning of the nesting broker. There's a supply chain here that's got to be targeted. And the more we can do to interrupt that supply chain, the harder we can make it on ransomware attackers.
Yeah, I agree with Matt. Is cryptocurrency to blame? No. Is it a huge part of ransomware and the incident response process? Yes. So I don't think cryptocurrency is ever going to go away, but I think it can be regulated in such a way where we can get information that's really helpful in our fight against cybercrime. And I think that we should be looking at that as an avenue to pursue. You're on mute, Ari.
I asked a question about the task force. I was typing, so I wanted to click while you were speaking because I was going to respond to this but I'll just say it. So someone just asked a question about the ransomware task force report, which Jen worked on. Folks from Resilience worked on it. Matt, were you on it as well? I was on it. This is put together by the Institute for Security and Technology. Is that right? And they built a ransomware task force, which included a lot of former government people that deal with ransomware directly today, people from some large technology companies, from some small startups involved in it, and really laid out a really detailed report. It was started last October, November, and came out like right when the Colonial Pipeline situation happened, and got a lot of attention then. So, but if you look up Ransomware Task Force report, you will find it. So I was going to type it in, but we'll forget that for now. I do want to turn to the we promised we would do the career day piece of this. We'll still have time in the end for one last question. But Matt, if you could do a quick overview, what we're going to have call on you to do the career day thing. I was hoping to everybody, but people can follow up Jen about how young lawyers get involved in this space. They can follow up with V8 about how a former NSA, Air Force NSA tech becomes the CEO of a startup in this space. But we'll go to Matt, how a former Hill staffer becomes an insurance agent, and then on to insurance broker, and then on to doing this work.
I mean, obviously, I just take any random job that comes my way. So, I mean, I was a lawyer before I ever became a Hill staffer. I was working as a litigator in New York City. It was not long after 9/11. I was applying to be a U.S. attorney, and that road just led me to an opportunity to work on the committee. And on the committee and at the Bush White House was my exposure to data privacy. And then ransomware really started to become a thing, I would say around the turn of 2011, 2012, cybersecurity and critical infrastructure especially. And it grew as an insurance product, and it reflects the really essential role that insurance plays in security and in hygiene for cybersecurity. So I was fortunate to meet a great guy at Marsh & McLennan named Jack Flug, who I was introduced to, had conversations with for a few years, and he brought me in just to talk to clients about exposure for cybersecurity, potential consequences, and regulatory developments. And I kind of got involved in the role through that. Cyber insurance, I'm sure as you read the reports, it's really exploded over the past few years, and it's continuing to grow. We have more and more assets online. It's a more essential part of the industry, probably going to rival the property industry at some point. And then through working in this industry, I mean, Kivu is an oft-used vendor. And they had the availability of somebody who kind of had that government role background and had a litigation background and knew the industry as well. One thing I would say for folks who are kind of gravitating towards this, don't take for granted the bilingual ability of being able to speak the talk from in the Beltway and whatever the industry is outside the Beltway. One of the things I was amazed by was how folks, not everybody, but real operators, people who ran lines of insurance in New York didn't really appreciate how Washington worked and how the mechanisms of Washington work, how committees pass legislation, timing of bills, when things are more likely to happen or when something's dead in the water. So you have a valuable language skill by being able to talk about what happens in the Beltway. Go learn the industry skill outside of it, of what's important to industry, and then you really have an important talent.
And just a quick thing, how do you become a negotiator? Since we specifically advertised that in the.
Most of our negotiators are former law enforcement who have dealt with criminal industry. I oversee that group, and I oversee that group mostly because of the sanctions role. That are we checking all the relevant sanctions lists? Are we, are we making the right connections between new actors to known threat actors who are sanctioned, et cetera? So I'm really more along the lines of harassing our negotiators to making sure they're getting as much information as possible so we can do the right compliance checks. But if you want to become a negotiator, law enforcement is probably the best avenue that I've found.
There you go. So let me ask this last question. Maybe we'll go in the reverse order of the panel. We'll give Jen the final word since she had to speak first and do the kickoff. And really, I just wanted to get at where we're going. Where is this issue going in the future? And we've touched on it a little bit, but haven't gone into too much detail about it. And you have everyone about a minute and a half or so to kind of answer the question. So VA, you want to take the first stab at it, and then we'll go to Matt and then to Jen.
I was actually chatting with some of the folks on the Q&A as well, but my personal opinion here is that ransomware is, again, the topic of the time, but again, just a symptom, not a cause. The future is going to be whether or not we can move to continuous cyber hygiene and improvement. I see some questions here about continuous updates or updates on devices. When people start to look at that and take those items seriously and are updating rapidly because they understand, attackers like me, the moment I see Patch Tuesdays, the first thing that happens is exploit Wednesdays, because all of us that know how to do reverse engineering, we look at the differences between that patch. What was patched? Why was it patched? I can then go find and weaponize those vulnerabilities. And that's how these crimeware operators have this down to a science. Where we need to go is the ability for folks to take these patches seriously and apply them the moment they come out. That will take a lot of the low-hanging fruit upon which ransomware and other symptoms are successful on, and take them away. So, I'm looking forward to getting away from point journeys and turning cyber into a continuous journey, not a destination.
Yeah, you've just reminded me of the that also that NIST for people in the government or people interested in this and looking at the defense. NIST has a ransomware profile that they put together where what you need to do to protect yourself, and with highlighting the main areas, prioritizing things that the bad guys go after, and ways to recover. And the DHS has a very good site on ransomware response at this point as well that they put together over the last year. So just wanted to highlight those two government resources for people inside the government. And Matt, what's next?
Yeah, I would say that I am pretty impressed or happy with the whole government response. I don't know that if any one activity can be cited as, oh, that's a stellar development in the fight against ransomware, but by approaching the whole government response, we can actually push back and make some difference. I will say, for most important about where we're going, I'm a little pessimistic on it, and maybe I can be corrected along the way by some of the manufacturers of technology, but by the way we're putting together supply chains and by the way that we're putting devices on the internet, I mean, there's the certain thought of he who doesn't know history is doomed to repeat it. when the internet was built, it was built originally without the concept of security. And as we're increasing these placements, I don't know if we're incorporating the correct level of security or if we're just expanding the attack surface with more bugs and holes in it. So we'll see. You know, you can be a glass that's half full or a half empty person, but I'm concerned.
Okay, Jen.
I'll try and uplift some people.
Yeah, give us some optimism here, please.
All right, so I don't know how optimistic it is, but number one, will the attack stop? Absolutely not. They've been way too successful. They've made so much money. I don't think the attacks are going to stop. However, I do think the success rate will reduce, where we aren't seeing as many organizations as crippled by ransomware events or needing to pay the ransoms. And I gave the stats earlier about the percentage of our clients that actually need to pay the ransoms. And that's a good stat. The majority of our clients don't have to. I think the percentage will continue to decrease and more organizations are going to be better prepared to respond. I do see better preparation, especially being fueled by the cyber insurance community. Organizations are just stronger. But I do see a need for recognition by the government of the non-critical infrastructure victims of ransomware. Of the clients that we have, I'd say about 85% of them do not fall in the bucket of critical infrastructure. So when you are considering the mandatory reporting that you are requiring, I would encourage you to recognize that non-critical infrastructure. They have a lot of really helpful information that might help in your fight against cybercrime.
That was better. Thank you for making me feel better. Although I do sort of agree with Matt that people are not really thinking about the potential consequences is making in a lot of these. There was a question about baking security into things, and we haven't necessarily seen that in all the places that Matt raised. So, but we are moving forward. There is some progress, and your numbers show that too. So I appreciate that. The optimism too. So I'm going to thank the panelists. I thought it was very informative. People want to follow up with us individually, you're welcome to do that. I'm going to just hand things back to Tim now, though.
Yeah, thank you, Ari. That was great. This was like a master class in ransomware attacks and what companies need to do. And, you know, it's really great for policymakers on the Hill to be able to see inside the business of how this works and the changing dynamics of everything. It's really great. Thank you so much. I did put in the chat and on Twitter the link to the ransomware report from the Institute for Security and Technology. They basically, for the name of their organization, they took the 3 most common words in tech policy. So it's not very unique, but I sent you the direct link to the framework. And I you know, again, I want to thank, you know, Zach from Congressman McCaul's office and the other co-chairs, Congressman Eshu, Senator Leahy, Senator Thune, and especially you, Ari, and V8 and Jennifer and Matt. This was amazing. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
Yeah. So we'll do the next tech policy recess will be, you know, sometime in November before Thanksgiving. It's coming up. Have a great recess and thank you all. We'll talk next time.
Thank you.